We are live. It is another great day of Cribl TV. It's a fantastic Friday. We have Ed Bailey,
Yay!
the inimitable, the smart, the intelligent Jackie McGuire. So happy to be here. We are going to talk about RSA. So, Jackie, tell me a story. What do you think about RSA?
If I could pick it up and put it in San Diego, that would be pretty awesome. But I also have tons of friends and loved ones in the Bay Area, so I'm happy to be going back for that reason. And it's a huge trade show, which always means that all my other favorite people from security will be there, which is exciting. As a data science and AI nerd, that seems to be the theme of the year. So I'm also excited to see what everybody's up to in that area. What about you? What are you excited for at RSA?
I mean, on the positive, I'm going to look at the world in a good way. I am excited to see what security professionals are focused on. I'm especially interested in the talks. I think the keynotes. Now, in the downside, the marketing. Let's talk about the marketing. And I think the insatiable need to make everything about AI and ML is it just reminds me of so many other trends. And so I think it's important, and especially I'm hoping that our viewers are look at these things, look at all these trends and especially marketing trends as maybe things not to do, things to be amused about, but not to take especially seriously. But then also to have a view of, how should we address this? Like we've talked before, AIML. I think it's something important, but it's also something you have to have a jaundiced view of.
Yeah, I think there's a few different levels that you have to look at AI at, and I think from the high level of returning value to the enterprise, that's kind of where we get stuck, and we kind of can be idealistic about the things it can do. And one of my concerns as an economist has been, are we really taking into account the true cost of AI and machine learning? And I think, as typically happens when new technologies or trends emerge, you see a lot of large companies and then venture private equity backed companies artificially subsidize the cost of things, right? So this happens with new software. You can use it for free or almost nothing. When new companies bring out additional tools, typically they'll let their largest customers use them for free for a while. And with AI and machine learning, it's been all of this quote unquote free AI. And so they get you hooked on it, you make it a critical part of your business. And then when they pass the cost along, finally, that can cause some issues. So I'm definitely keeping my eye on that as a potential concern. Because I think you were saying you've already talked to some people using AI in the enterprise who it's consuming a lot more compute than they expected it to.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. There ain't nothing's free. And so there's always a cost. I think that AIML I think it's something everyone should be looking at, but should be careful experimentation, understanding where it matters, understanding the business value, and especially looking at the long-term costs, because we've seen it over and over again in technology. The initial sweetener is low, it's cheap. Then over time, those costs creep. And it's just the nature of the world. And so you have to look because once you get your business wrapped up into these processes, you got to understand, what's going to be my year 4 or year 5 costs.
Yeah, and I mean, you can find enterprises with a pretty myopic view of the cost, because the cost is significantly more extensive than just the implementation and maintenance costs of running it, right? So if you're going to deploy AI in your enterprise, your data architecture has to completely change. The way you think about data has to
Exactly.
completely change, because the way you're going to use data will completely change. And I gave a talk at Initech in Austin this past week. Actually, this week, I don't even know what day it is. I've been across the country and back.
Right.
Fantastic conference, by the way. It was a really, really good talk. And it was actually about guardrails for AI. And somebody asked at the end of the session, we're hearing from our executive team that everybody in the enterprise should know AI. Do you really think that's feasible? And my answer is kind of like, well, should everybody know how to write AI and machine learning in Python? No. Or R? That's not really realistic, right? But should everybody in your enterprise know how to engineer a prompt if you're going to be letting people use large language models and generative AI? Absolutely. If they're going to be allowed to use those things, you have to train them how to use them. It's not just here you go, have fun with it. Like prompts you get out of a prompt what you put into it. And so if you don't learn how to do that, so the training cost can be significant. And then the guardrails, you have to, how many enterprises have policies around data and compute and user access that have anything to do with AI or the potential fallout? So it's hard not to get overly excited about things that are more efficient, but I also think there's a lot of other things to keep in mind. So it'll be interesting to see how that's marketed. To your point at
Or,
RSA, we were just talking before we got on here about the previous years. There's always something every year that's like
or,
the big thing, right? It was like XDR a couple years ago.
yeah.
Zero trust was really big. That was going to solve everybody's problems. There's always something new, right? And then unfortunately, the reality hits a lot of enterprises as they try to deploy it.
Yeah,
It disappears.
yeah, and that's why to me it's so important to have controlled trials, to understand it, to learn it. To, I mean, for example, I think there's some amazing applications right now with AI/ML. RPA, robotic process automation, is just having some really significant results. Customer service chatbots, internal chatbots can have really massive return on value. But the idea that I'm now going to run my security based on AI, that's where it gets really dangerous. I mean, is AI going to be accurate enough? I would say no. But I think that there's some places where, for example, you're using that chatbot technology to help your junior level SOC analyst to now properly and consistently track a case, to elevate a case, to escalate a case. I think there's a lot of supporting features that you can help someone be more efficient, be more effective. And then that's where you have to look at those shoulder use cases where I think can have big benefit, but it takes thought and planning. And just taking
Yeah.
the marketing and saying, let's deploy Copilot, we'll solve all of our problems. I don't think that's going to work out really well.
No, and I think, it occurred to me as I was giving talks over AI the last couple months that there's some fundamental things about AI that people don't, or especially generative AI, that people don't necessarily understand. One of them is the difference between better and and faster. And so there's this concept that AI is somehow smarter than humans or better than humans, and it's not. It's faster. OpenAI doesn't give you a better answer to a question than you would probably find yourself with Google in an hour or two on your hands. It just does it a lot faster, so it seems smarter because it gives you an instant answer. And there's a real distinction there. And so I think you're right. I think it's with any automation, and going back, any automation, even if it has nothing to do with AI machine learning, it never completely removes involvement in a process, because you always need a check and balance to make sure that the automation is still working properly and that things aren't being missed. So if you're automating, for example, like creating tickets and sending them to your security team, you still need somebody to go in periodically or some type of check on that to make sure that something doesn't break. Because what tends to happen when you introduce automation is that when nobody's responsible for it anymore, nobody's watching that process because it happens automatically. So I think even just from the very basics, to your point of making security over reliant on AI to fill out tickets, to send them the right places, you still need a human to be monitoring that and making sure it's going well. Maybe you don't need 10 humans doing it anymore, but you probably still need one.
Yeah. I'm going to say the dirty word for every engineer, governance. Oh my gosh. And it's just,
Ew.
yeah, it is ooh, but you have to back check your accuracy. You have to back check what you're doing. Changes in business logic will throw off AI like crazy. And also let's talk about data. I think especially with the rise of private LLMs, and don't get me started about how much enterprise data has leaked into Chat GPT. But that's a whole nother thing. But as the rise of probably these private LLMs, that you're now having to have that governance around your data, because nasty data is going to get nasty results.
Yeah, and we've seen this happen in all sorts of contexts at very, very large companies who should know better, right? We've seen companies accidentally publish full machine backups with passwords and session tokens. We've seen companies accidentally have their chatbots hallucinate these crazy return policies, or
That
with
was pretty awesome.
the Tahoe that was sold for $1. So there's all of these things that I think we don't you don't stop and think about, like, what are those guardrails look like, and
Sure.
like where can things go really off the rails. And it seems like people from AI fall into one of two camps: is either like the Terminator, like AI is going to take over and enslave humanity, or the like AI is going to do half my job for me and things are great. And the reality is probably somewhere halfway between the two.
It's always in between, and I think with some proper thought behind it. I heard a great talk from a guy who's a chief enterprise architect for a pretty large drugstore chain, and they were talking about the 4 or 5 places that they're starting off with AI, and they're seeing enormous results, but they're just being really careful, and they're putting in these
Yeah,
processes to sustain it. Because, like, for what they're saying is like, hey, the things we're doing, people's lives depend on it. We have to be careful, but
yeah,
they're already seeing that value. And I think that's the main message is, you got to progress. You can't ignore it, but it's also
yeah.
important to, you know, put some controls in place, use the dirty word of governance, hire people with data skills. I think it's more important than ever.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think when a lot of the privacy regulations started coming out, and especially the industry specific kind of more stringent ones, it really laid bare how few enterprises have their data classification and identification done correctly across the enterprise, right? A lot of times your more sensitive departments will be better at it, but typically internal large language models and AI and things like that are not just using the data from the departments who are really good at annotating code and tagging data. It's using it from across the enterprise. And so when I think about the data, the way you architect your data will have to fundamentally change, because there are situations in which duplicate data or substantially similar data can cause serious problems in data science. And we've with the amount of data we're producing in the enterprise now, and with it increasing as much as it is, that really means that humans aren't really reliably able to check that data on the way in. And so unless we develop affordable, scalable ways to filter old data through, pipelines that will get it into a format where you can actually use it, I think we're going to see some things go fairly awry. We've already seen some interesting things, but the problem is likely to get worse.
Yeah, I think especially with the observability and security data sets, I think BI data is going to be better situated because there's ages of schema and governance around it. But security and observability data typically has little governance around it, and the variability is deadly. And that's why I was going like especially when you're relying upon it to make AI to make decisions on highly variable and volatile data, you got to be careful.
Yeah, and I think it's the challenge of adapting to that and of addressing the problem. Is it's like driving a car 80 miles an hour down the highway and trying to change parts on it while you're driving. You can't just pull over when your network or your infrastructure is running a critical process in a business. So it's like, how do you
Right.
go about the process of modernizing your architecture without putting anything at risk? And so that's something that you and I have talked about quite a bit. And I think we're actually going to end up writing and blogging and doing our thing on that quite a bit this year, because we don't really give people, and it's interesting because from enterprise to enterprise, the average age and the span of age of architecture really varies. And so, you have, I was shocked getting into the tech side of finance, how old some of the equipment involved in small banks and credit unions is. And I think that's the case in a lot of like industrial systems and things like that. So,
Yeah, I recently saw
they're really,
a tea machine at an industrial. So yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So I mean,
It's
we need to give people more practical, and I think like stepped out ways to go about addressing these issues.
Yeah, I think it's all about that data modernization, and I think that it's the process of understanding, of discovering, of updating, and having a continuous governance. And I think I really like that we're going to start doing that, because I think a lot of teams are looking for guidance on where to get started and how, and also
Yeah,
just why it's worth spending time on the dirty words of governance, because we just no one wants to do that, but it's very important that you do it.
yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the other things that we're going to start seeing more is with all this data. I mean, this is an exponentially larger amount of data than most enterprises are used to dealing with. And low value data, if you're using AI machine learning, starts to have a significantly, I don't know that it increases in value, but it becomes more necessary as training data. And
Right.
so we're going to start to see, the need for ways to manage that. And I think one of the things that we're going to be doing in our booth at, it's 4224, right, at
Right.
RSA, is showing how you can use Cribl Lake and Cribl Search to really kind of start to wrangle some of that data where you need to store mass volumes of potentially low or uncertain value data, and then be able to kind of get to it and put it where you need to. And that's increasingly, I think, going to be an issue as we try to apply machine learning and data science to all these places in the organization that have never really had to retain data in mass long term before.
Yeah, I think that's a really good use case because I think you need a place to stage your data, to clean it up, to fit it. And then you can have essentially a temporary bucket in Cribble Lake where then you can take that clean data and pipe that into the data, the analytics, the analytics engine of your choice. And so I think it's a really good use case, and it's a pattern that I think is going to get a lot more common.
Yeah, and is it one of the things that when I was writing data science for a sim and doing like security related data science, one of the things that was also really important was, and this is where I think our search capability comes in really handy, is being able to pull a really good sample set of data, like data that's truly representative of the data we're going to be working with. And like Cribble Lake has the ability to add some kind of enhanced tags to your data that make it easier to search through. And I would have loved that when I was, pouring through syslog and things like that, because if you build a model with data that's not representative of the data as a whole, some really terrible things happen when you deploy it. So I also think search is a great way to make sure that if you are going to be using, any type of, and even if it's not AI and machine learning, even if you're just sending it to your sim, you want to make sure if you're trying out a new sim or something like that, that the data is representative. And so being able to kind of tag data and be more specific about what you want to pull back is great.
Yeah, the powering of tagging of data coming in gives you that context that's so
Mhm.
important. Recently did an exercise, and the amount of context we were adding to the event was actually a little larger than the event because there's all these different things you wanted to understand. And typically,
Mhm.
you would have an analyst who would have to go look up this information in multiple places to understand, what does all this mean? What's the
Mhm.
context? Where was it? Who owns it? What application? And by
Yeah.
having that attached as tags gives you a lot of power. And also just from a searching standpoint, it's typically a lot faster to search the tags than it is the actual raw data. So there's
Yeah.
some advantages of that approach.
Yeah, doing incident response, it's definitely easier to get 5 people on a video call and have them all look at one log that has a bunch of context in it than to get 5 people in their own queries on their own platforms and all asking each other questions about what this means, how it relates to that, if it's possible this has to do with
Um,
something else. No, I totally hear you. And I've
so
seen incident response go really well, and I've seen it go really poorly. And usually when it goes really poorly is when people are all working with a piece of the picture and there's not really a fast easy way to bring it all together. So that's another place where having a powerful tool like Cribble Stream and even Edge as a collector to be able to collect things and really optimize the way you do that helps in the process, which is something that really excited me.
oh yeah, people, especially people who are professionals at IR, you find out why you ask, why are you using spreadsheets for this? And then they show you why, and you're like, and that's right. But yeah, so we want to help people get better results with less effort because adding a spreadsheet to an IR and to an IR response, we're putting millions of rows of data into a spreadsheet. That's just painful.
Yeah, yeah, or you're trying to go through like 400 messages in an incident response thread in Teams or
Oh yeah,
Slack or wherever it is, and make sense of it. And I guess maybe you could start using an AI like bot to summarize those threads, but for
yeah.
sure, like one or two logs, or being able to execute a quick search in Cribble Search and say, okay, pull only logs that have this thing in them, or from this very specific time period, or from this set of users or endpoints, like is a lot better than a bunch of people filtering through their own data.
So we got a question from the class, Logan Carter. So does Cribble plan on taking their suite of tools and position themselves as a SIM? Seems like Lake and Search make the next evolution of the product. So let me take the first swing at that. So Logan, right now we're all about helping to augment and make your sim better. Right? We are not trying to look at data in near real time, for example. We're not trying to give that instantaneous recognition that something's happening. But does all these Cribl tools help improve your sim, give your sim better data, make it easier, faster to write detections? Absolutely. Now, in terms of are we going to get into the sim space later on? I'm not sure. I think it's a very crowded market, so I really not sure. But I definitely
Yeah.
I think the main focus is let's make your sim better. Does that make sense,
Yeah.
Jackie? You got anything you want to add there?
Yeah, so I've built a sim before. I was employee 7 at Lumen when they built a sim, and I wrote a lot of those detections. That is not an easy market to get into, sustain in, a product to maintain, and yeah, I agree with you. And I think I do see I see some enterprises going the simless route. So I've actually had a couple conversations with CISOs who are like, we're paying a lot of money to have people engineer detections in our sim. Why don't we just do that in some type of mass storage? Or so do I think that in some cases people use Cribl to move away from a sim? Yes, but it's not to move to Cribl as a sim. It's more like we're going to do some of this in house. The other thing I think is that Cribl can be an alternative to a sim in the sense that it can route that low volume data or low value data, sorry. So like the internal approved firewall traffic, your VPC logs, all that stuff that you either don't put in your SIM because you're not getting a lot of value out of it, or you don't collect it at all. Route that to Cribl Lake, route that to your own bucket, and collect that data, and then only put it in your SIM if you need to. So we're a great augment. If you're looking to move away from a SIM strategy to do something on your own, we can enable that. But yeah, I I wouldn't want to build another SIM personally.
Well, I do have one customer that's doing something really interesting. Let's call it a deconstructed SIM. So what they've done is they've teased apart the elements of a SIM, and so they're using Stream to collect data. They're actually using a popular IT ops tool to there's feeding data, and they're doing the correlation alerts there. And so this IT ops tool is taking the data, and they do their case management, and so they create the alerts there. They do their case management in their ticketing platform, and then they do their actual incident response in Cribl Search. And so I like what they're doing. It's very deconstructed, and they have the engineering team to do that. But I'm not sure. This is not a huge company, so I'm not. So in terms of is it scalable or not, I'm interested to see the approach because I'm a big fan of decoupling. I'm not a big fan of one platform trying to solve everything. So we'll see.
Yeah. I think, but I do see. So I think where Cribl is trying to go, and where we see the future is in enabling customers to kind of better manage a data strategy as a whole. Because one of the things that we've noticed, I think, Ed, both you and I, in talking to customers, is um, a lot of times they're like, I have strategies and policies and procedures for specific things, but as an overarching whole, like I don't really have a good strategy for determining what the value is that my data holds and figuring out how to handle it based on what that value is. And the weird thing about data is that you can't always tell what the value is because that's dependent on a number of things. Some data's value declines over time. Some data's value is highly dependent on whether you've got an incident or an outage going on. And so, where I think we'll continue to innovate is in giving customers options for controlling kind of like where they're placing that data, how they're, determining how to value it, and then aligning their storage or their processing strategy to really fit the value of that data. And we're looking forward to kind of you and I are working together on some stuff on that. And it's great too because my original career was as an economist and financial advisor. So I love talking about like how to value things, especially things that are like not necessarily very straightforward. So we're going to be building out some ways to think about that. And then Cribl will be working, moving forward on some additional ways to help you kind of tier that data and store it in more cost-effective ways.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot. I think this is something you see a lot of security teams. Also goes back to the point of they're putting too many use cases onto a single platform without trying to understand does it make sense. And so having your SIM platforms be your compliance and retention platform also is it's hard to call it a mistake because it's so common, but it's just something you want to avoid. And your SIM is going to be your most expensive place to store data. And so decoupling your retention and your compliance at a minimum, I would argue decoupling a lot of your threat hunt, a lot of your analytics would be important too. Now, the downside, of course, is people want to be able to solve all their problems in one tool. And with an unlimited amount of money, you bet. But when your budgets when your budgets are in a struggle, that's why I just start looking at decoupling.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And as much as we don't like to talk about it out loud, the procurement process isn't fun. The contract negotiation process isn't fun. And if you're entirely dependent on one vendor to be your SIM, your storage platform, your investigation tool, and all that, like you kind of lose some of your negotiating power. Because I
Exactly.
mean, they know they're a critical part of your process. So not only do you lose it from a contract and pricing negotiation, but you also that's a key risk in your organization. And so when we
Oh,
think about things like vendor risk, supply chain risk, key supplier risk, decoupling some of those things, while it may seem like it adds friction, really does reduce systemic risk, which is just as important, I think, as direct risk from security incidents.
exactly. So we're getting toward the end of the half hour. Jackie, do you have anything you want to share with the class?
Please come see us at RSA. I will be at the B-Sides party on Sunday night if you happen to be attending that. Again, we're booth 4224 on the show floor. We've got some really exciting stuff going on, and I'll be there Monday through Friday, or Monday through Thursday, I guess. I'm flying out pretty early Friday. But yeah, we would love to see you. And then also CribbleCon.
That's
I
right.
will be not in Vegas in June, but Ed's going. And Ed's got a lot on his plate at CribbleCon. Tell
Yeah.
people about all the stuff you're doing at CribbleCon.
Yeah, well, let's start. I mean, I'll be at RSA. I'm coming in Monday. I'll be going home Thursday afternoon. So looking forward. Please stop by the booth. Always happy to chat, talk. We're going to have, was it Pagan Idols? We're going to have the Cribble Happy Hour. So definitely looking forward to that. CribbleCon is going to be awesome. Show June 10th. So we're going to be having an all day sessions with customers. We're going to have a bunch of keynotes. I'm going to be leading a lunch and learn with our federal, state, and education partners. I did that last year, and that was a lot of fun. I really, really enjoyed that. We're also going to spending a bunch of time on Tuesday and Wednesday. And so CribbleCon is going to be at Caesars. We're going to move the show and Tuesday and Wednesday over to the Win. We're going to be doing demos. We're going to be providing coffee, and I'm going to be leading whiteboarding sessions. So you want to, if you got any questions after Monday, come back and talk. We'll talk about your strategy. We're talking about all those fun people and process things, and we're really looking forward to it. It's my favorite event of the year.
And back to RSA. So probably most importantly, my birthday is the 7th. So Tuesday at RSA will be my birthday. I really
Uh-oh.
like tiramisu and chocolate cake if anybody wants to bring me treats. No,
There
I'm
we go.
just kidding. But I would like to see as many people as possible. So if you want to come by the booth and wish me a happy birthday, Tuesday's the day to do it.
Very cool. Hey, it was a great. We had really appreciate the comments. Thanks, Logan. Had a really nice viewing audience. I really appreciate it. Hit us up in the hit us up in the community Slack if you want to chat. We're also on social media, and we just want to hear from you. So really appreciate everyone's time, and also sign up for CribbleCon. We want to see you there. All right, take care and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.